Hello, my name is Dr. Moira Junger, and I'm a health psychologist, and I'm the CEO of the Sleep Health Foundation. Welcome to this short video on understanding and supporting sleep in people experiencing an immune deficiency. We are delighted to be partnering with Immunodeficiencies Foundation Australia to bring you this short video on such an important topic. The presentation will provide an update on the research evidence for addressing common sleep problems and supporting quality sleep. I want you to all get a better understanding of how sleep works, a better understanding of common sleep issues, learn strategies for improving your sleep quality, and I'll also provide you with a range of sleep resources for sleep support and information. So I've been a health psychologist for over 25 years, and before that I was a registered nurse for over 10 years at a busy public hospital here in Melbourne, at the Alfred Hospital. So I certainly know a bit about health, both professionally and even my personal experience. So in terms of immunodeficiencies, you would know more than most people that there are lots of possible issues relevant to sleep. So there's ongoing fatigue. There can be, not for everyone, of course, there's a range of symptoms, a range of severities, but it's often common that there's ongoing fatigue. Daytime napping can be a feature of people struggling with their health. You can be more homebound, so there's less routine, less exposure to regular light-dark cycles, and less outdoor light. Can be breathing problems or coughing at night, affecting sleep, more infections, more time in bed, pain, of course, reduced quality of life, more tendency towards anxiety and depression, low mood, being worried. Some medications interfere with sleep quality and quantity. And of course, the illness itself may structure, may change the actual microstructure of sleep itself. But the good news is, no matter what issues are affecting your sleep, there are things that you can do to help improve your sleep. And these involve understanding more about the way sleep works and also certain behaviours that you can change. So the timing of your sleep, your exposure to light and dark, when you do certain activities or not. And of course, modifying your thinking about sleep to change your thinking to have more helpful, more informed, more adaptive thoughts about sleeping, and also learning ways of self-soothing, just being able to take it into your own hands to manage your sleep and to manage your anxiety and stress levels. So I want you to ask yourself, how is your sleep at the moment? How satisfied are you with your current sleep pattern? If you're dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, it's important to work out why. Let's have a think about problem solving some of the potential mechanisms underlying your poor sleep. I want you to have some time throughout this presentation today, have a think about some of the strategies and pick a few and implement them over the next 4 weeks. One of the most important things to remember is sleep, like many other things, isn't going to be fixed overnight. If you've had difficulty with sleep for, say, 10 years, a 2-week attempt and nothing happens is not likely to fix everything. I think it's important to realise that turning around the Titanic or turning around, a big problem or a sort of a chronic issue, it does take time, takes perseverance, and sometimes it takes just a few attempts. So hang in there. An important thing to start, when you start to think about improving your sleep, understanding a few key things about how sleep works is important. So think about sleep across the night, what it looks like, what normal sleep looks like. 70% of Australians, when asked, what do you think sleep looks like, to draw us a diagram, draw a diagram like this, and looking like that sleep is something that you're just a bit of it's like a U-shaped thing, that you're up awake and then you go down into a sort of a deep sleep immediately. You stay there most of the night in a state where you're not waking at all, and then you come up and wake up. So that's really incorrect. It's important to have good expectations of sleep, that across the night there's a series of light stages and deep stages and wakefulness. Waking is normal. All of us would wake at least a few times per hour, even with not only the transition between sleep stages, but when we move body positions, or someone might be noisy outside the room, or you cough or something like that, it actually sort of wakes us up temporarily. So mostly when we wake, we just go straight back down into sleep. But once we're worried about being awake and sort of look at the time or get frustrated, that's where a lot of the problems lie. The other thing to remember is thinking about stages of sleep, how there's some are light and some are deep and they vary. Some of the stages around stage 1 and stage 2 can feel like people are awake. It's like stage 2 particularly is quite ambiguous for some people, in that you're lying there and you think you're awake, but you're in fact asleep. Even when I had a sleep study, I was out by 2 hours of the amount of sleep that I had, because some of the stuff I'd misperceived lying there awake, thinking I was, you know, thinking I was awake. And in fact, I was actually in stage 1 and 2 sleep. So keep that in mind as well when you're understanding sleep and getting it, um, you know, making assessments of your own sleep. It's important to know that sometimes it's quite common to be wrong. Two of the most important mechanisms that drive our sleep are this thing known as a sleep drive, and the other one is our body clock. So let's start with the sleep drive first. It's something that can't be measured with a blood test, like a bit like thirst or hunger or libido, or there's just no actual test for it, but there's a sense, you just know internally how you feel. So our sleep drive is really how sleepy we are. And when we wake up in the morning, our sleep drive starts, and it builds over time as our wakefulness goes on. And it only is dropped when we sleep. So whether that's a big major sort of 6 or 7 or 8 hour sleep period, or even with a short nap, sometimes that can actually drop our sleep drive. So it's important to not nap for longer than, say, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes maximum, because that reduces our sleep drive, which makes it harder to sleep when we get the opportunity to have a big long sleep. So if you go to bed too early, you actually have less sleep drive. You're not quite ready enough. So it's important to pick the right bedtime for you. You have more sleep drive and you'll have more likelihood of having a consolidated sleep, less wakefulness, more deep sleep, more better quality sleep. Talking about body rhythm, I mentioned just before that there's the other major mechanism is our body clock. So we want our rhythm and our exposure to light and our wakefulness, we want it to be this sort of high exposure, high wave of light during the day. And during the nighttime, particularly pre-bed, we want to actually have, a dip in our light exposure. So it's really important to realize that the hormone called melatonin, which is the hormone that we need to initiate and maintain sleep, is only secreted in response to dim light conditions. So it gets the message via the eyes, via the optic nerve, deep into the brain, in the pineal gland is where the melatonin is produced and secreted, and then transported around the body. That whole mechanism is dependent on light and dark. So make sure that your brain is able to get the right messages about the darkness. So that involves obviously handheld devices, computers, etc. Making sure if you are using them at night in the pre-bed period, make sure that you have the night glow on, a night mode, rather than the bright blue light, because the blue light, the component of all light, whether it's daytime light or nighttime light, or whether it's natural or whether it's from a device, that's the component of light that suppresses melatonin. So it's very important to avoid that. So reducing your light in the evening is a really easy and manageable thing to do to actually ensure that your body clock remains regular, and you're not shooting yourself in the foot by having too much light exposure in the build up to your sleep period. When we're talking about body clocks, it's also important to recognize that some people actually are sort of extreme types, a bit like introversion or extroversion. They're there's a sort of a spectrum. Also a spectrum with our circadian rhythm that some of us are real night owls and some of us are morning types. Most of us are sort of in the middle and can cope with adapting. But you may have a problem in that you're an extreme evening type. This is quite common in teenage years as well, particularly sort of 11, even 10, 11-year-old boys and girls, but mostly boys, can start to actually have a delay in their circadian rhythm, in their body clock, in that their melatonin that might have been secreted around 8, 9, or 10 o'clock when they were younger starts to be secreted much later, like even after midnight, after 3 a.m. even. So if that's you, it's important to recognize that and don't go to bed early, for goodness sake. Um, Making sure that you know that you're a night owl. You can't just jump into bed at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and expect to sleep. We have to have our circadian rhythm lined up with what's natural for us. And we also have to have that sleep drive, going, like sleepy and tired enough. So the onset around with delayed circadian rhythm, it could be just teenage years, but it also can be the onset with having poor health and just sort of having pain or delaying going to sleep because you don't want to lie down, or you're scared of having nightmares, or you're scared of just that restlessness that can happen when you're lying there. So I think it's important to be aware of it, to try morning light, being aware of the importance of getting up when you are awake in the morning, to get outside and have exposure to light, or even just in the window if you can't get out and about, because that will suppress melatonin, make you feel more alert. And also try having a fixed bedtime. So if you are someone who has a delayed sleep onset, you're not going to bed till like 2 in the morning, and there's not much you can do about that sometimes, but at least try and have a regular sort of get up time. So you set your alarm for, say, 8 hours later, so you actually start to build that regularity. The other thing you can think about too is taking melatonin as a pill, but make sure you do that in conjunction with your GP or a sleep specialist. It's very important to not just self-prescribe with melatonin. It's something that needs to be monitored, in terms of the dose, in terms of the safety for you. So we've talked about, your sleep drive and your body clock. Those things need to be, optimal. It's also very important to think about the relationship between our mental health and our sleep. So it's a two-way street, a bi-directional relationship, chicken and egg scenario. We used to think that people who had sleep problems, it was just merely a manifestation of their mental health problem, that, they're just stressed, they're just anxious, they're just depressed. That's why they're not sleeping well. But we now know, for the last 10 years or more, we know that it can be feeling down, feeling worried, etc., that produces your first ever episode of not sleeping well. And the other way around, in fact, that you can sometimes, that poor sleep over a period of time can be the first episode ever of anxiety or depression. So we know that improving sleep can improve both your mood, and your depression, and whether you're feeling worried or not, your anxiety. So you could actually have everything really well lined up. You're doing your mindfulness, you're doing, you've got your body clock thing sorted. But if you're feeling too stressed and you really just can't switch off your brain, then that's going to affect your sleep as well. So when you've got poor mental health, you do feel really uptight. You can be what we call hyper aroused, feeling very vigilant, unable to let go of the day. You can just be, it can be caused by generalized anxiety and stress. It'll be related to nightmares. It'll be related to having restlessness in your sleep. So, or just, general sort of current lifestyle issues will be making you feel sort of too stressed and too uptight to sleep. So reducing your stress at night is a very important factor for getting optimal or better sleep. So some of the important things to think about are keeping stimulants to a minimum. So be mindful of your levels of caffeine, alcohol, Nicotine, often people often underestimate or don't know that having, cigarettes, nicotine, these days maybe in vapes, etc., it's very stimulating and can affect sleep. Having a quiet time, like a buffer zone before sleeping, is also really important. So learning how to just not go, 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 or be doing stuff on the computer and then expect to sleep. Allow about an hour of relaxation. That relaxation may be TV, etc. It doesn't have to be all non-screen time, but making sure that if there is some screen time, that you've got the light sorted, you're not in bright light, and that the content is not stimulating. That's all very relaxing, calming stuff. So learning how to relax is really important and learning how to practice it regularly. So like playing the piano or driving a car, all of those things are a skill that are required to have practice and rehearsal. So if you're going to use something like a mindfulness-based meditation or a progressive muscle relaxation, etc., and you can find those via various apps, like try Smiley Mind or try there's a really good app called Breathe to Relax. And I'll give you some resources at the end of other things to try. Whatever you try, whatever you decide to do, make sure that you know that it does require practice and rehearsal. Many weeks, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day for many weeks on end before you get that skill. We think it's about 100 hours of practice generally before you can actually start to get that skill. It's important to feel safe at night, making sure that remind yourself that you're safe, that you lock the doors, or whatever it requires for you to tell yourself that you are safe. It can be also useful in terms of reducing your stress at night to have a daily kind of worry journal. I think it's important to, in the early evening, after you've done all your chores or you've done the dishes, you're thinking about going to bed but not quite ready yet, to get out your journal and list all your worries and get it all out of the way. Put it all out onto a bit of paper, or even if it's on your phone with the light down. It can be a way of just externalizing the stuff that you've been internalizing. So if you're sort of in bed and worried at night, it's important to get that out before preempt it, get it out before you're even in bed. Some people find it useful to also have a gratitude diary. Think about, say, 3 things that you're grateful for that day as a part of unwinding and reducing stress. And you can remind yourself of these things that are going well for you rather than the things that aren't going well. We often, particularly when it goes quiet, we often find ourselves ruminating or thinking about the stuff that's not going well and forget that there are some things, maybe at least one a day, sometimes 2 or 3, that you can actually be grateful for. And some of those things, there's lists of 100 things to be grateful for. Things like just the nature, animals, the kindness of friends, of family, etc. So we know that at night, when things go quiet, the emotional parts of the brain, unfortunately, do tend to sort of become more awake. And if we're prone to anxiety and worry, they're the things that kind of start to wake up. There's a cycle where feeling worried, threatened, feeling extra vigilant will interfere with your ability to sleep. And it's kind of one of those things that over time, it's evolved to protect us for survival. Like, say, if you're worried about in the ancient primitive times, if there was a snake in the cave or a lion outside the cave, of course, if you're worried, it keeps you from sleeping. So therefore, you're going to more likely survive. It doesn't make sense when we're worried and stressed and under threat to sleep soundly. So be aware of that and think about giving your brain the right messages that you aren't, in fact, under so much danger that you shouldn't sleep. Or in fact, because very rarely are we that stressed and it's a real threat that we're actually in danger. It's something that we are just thinking about. And so we've got to be mindful of controlling that aspect of worry and being able to calm ourselves down with alternative ways of thinking and doing. So this kind of what how we end up in the cycle of having kind of unhelpful thinking. It happens to all of us that we can get really in a bit of a sort of a vicious cycle about that. So we find ourselves having self-defeating, kind of overly negative thoughts, catastrophizing thoughts about our own illness, about life problems, about sleep itself. Like learning, you sometimes think, oh, I'm never going to sleep. Here we go again. Once I've been awake for 2 hours means I'm just not going to sleep all night. So being mindful of that how the power of our thinking can be reversed. So if you can actually think, if you know that these unhelpful thoughts can actually create certain behaviors, and then those certain behaviors can then reinforce the negative thinking, try and reverse that with having some more helpful thoughts. So dealing with these unhelpful thoughts is a really key way of being able to actually get better sleep and therefore improve your health and well-being, reduce pain, reduce fatigue. It's such an important skill for you to learn. So we can learn to unhook from that negative thinking. Often we can have things that we're telling ourselves that we can't cope, we've had enough, I must get 8 hours to be okay. Waking up is not normal. I shouldn't be waking. All this poor sleep is causing my flare-ups and my extra tiredness, extra sadness, which of course may be true. It's not like it's not normal to have those thoughts. So we all have them. It's actually important to normalize the tendency to be thinking like that. Don't be too hard on yourself. And the idea of trying to challenge them is not to be self-chastising, etc. It's actually to just think, how about if I can replace this negative thinking with a more positive thought, it will have an enormous benefit for improving my sleep and reducing negative emotion. So you can actually have more adaptive thoughts. You can just try practicing saying that everybody has poor sleep sometimes. I can cope with life even if I don't sleep well tonight. I don't need 8 hours. I can probably cope with, a broken amount of 4 or 5. You have in the past, you will in the future. So really trying to identify why you get those of you who do get fearful of not sleeping and fearful of the night itself sometimes, working towards acceptance of that fear and then learning to have a few tricks up your sleeve to combat it. So there's a whole range of different mental tricks you could come up with. I'd really encourage you to have a bit of a read or think about things you've learned in the past, or have a chat with others and what they find helpful. Sometimes it can be useful to have, to say, like a breathing type of exercise or a distraction kind of thing where you start to count backwards from 100, for instance, those sorts of things. I find it really important to actually have a counting example. And one of them that you might find useful is slowly counting, but visualizing the numbers, say 1, 2, and 3, thinking about them having different colors. For instance, imagine that the 1 was pink and that the 2 was in green and the 3 was in purple, etc. And when you're up to number 1 and you know that that's pink, think about something that's pleasant and pink that you can distract your brain with. Perhaps the number 2, when we're thinking that might be green, think about something that's green that can be really soothing and really pleasant to think about, and so on and so forth, that you go from, say, 1 to 10 without repeating any colors. And when you get to 10, start again. So you may try this. I'd like to, obviously, you've got to try it in the waking hours while you're awake. You practice this skill, like we talked about with a musical instrument or driving a car. And of course, you'll be thinking other things. It's really hard to just practice, and this doesn't have any other intrusive thoughts. But just keep doing it. When you think about something else or get interrupted, just bring yourself back to the exercise if you can. And then by the time you need it one time at night, you'll think, well, I've actually been able to practice that. I've actually got this skill. And if your sleep's where it needs to be, your body temperature body temperature's where it needs to be, you can actually before you know it, with a distracting technique like this, you'll most likely be able to fall off to sleep and hopefully wake up and the birds are chirping, the lights coming through the window, and you've actually been able to really, bring yourself back into a sleeping state with the waking that you had. It's also really important to have a positive attitude to sleep, and not only positive in that you value it, that's probably a given. If you're even watching this video, you know that sleep's important. But the other thing is making sure that you know that you can, that even if sleep's not great, that you're positive towards it and you know that it can change. So being dozy is okay. Just if you're lying there, you don't know if you're asleep or awake, it doesn't really matter. It's really important just to tell yourself that rest is good. Sometimes rest is good enough because you're most likely in stage 1 or 2 anyway. And that's good. It doesn't all have to be deep sleep. It doesn't all have to be REM sleep. Any stage of sleep is good enough. In fact, if you're someone who's monitoring your sleep within some kind of sleep tracker, be aware that they're not that accurate yet in terms of sleep staging. They're okay, but they're not to be thought of as gospel. They're not necessarily 100% accurate. So I want you to be aware of not sort of forcing sleep. Don't watch the clock and get sort of fretful about the time ticking away. Try to sort of resist the temptation to look at the time overnight, like flicking your phone or looking at some kind of clock near the bed. Also, avoid giving yourself the label of insomnia. It's a sort of a simple but effective technique that it's really much more important to say, oh, I'm having difficulty with sleep from time to time, rather than giving yourself the label, because then you can actually focus on having really good sleep habits and not attaching some negative label to yourself that you feel like there's an extra burden on top of all the other things that you're dealing with. I think that sleep is going to be difficult for all of us at some time of our life. It's particularly difficult if you're in poor health, like having some struggles with your health. So kind of normalizing and accepting it and saying I do have poor sleep from time to time, rather than saying I'm an insomniac or my insomnia is really bad, can be a really important part of coping and in fact improving your sleep. After trying these sorts of things, it's important to see whether your sleep is still something you're dissatisfied with, and select a few strategies. We'll talk about a few more strategies coming up, and then again, implement them over the next 4 weeks, knowing that it's not going to be easy. It's not just 2 weeks. I would say, 4 weeks to 8 weeks, even sometimes a few months, is what it takes to turn around something that's been problematic for you for perhaps many, many years, if not decades. So it's so important to choose the right strategy for you. Not all things are going to work for all people. You know that with other aspects of your health. Health is such an individual thing. Sleep is particularly one of those things that has a huge amount of individual differences. Our response to light, our response to caffeine, how many hours we really do need, whether we're a night owl or not, all those sorts of things are so individual. But these are some of the strategies you can choose from, and pick just a few that you resonate with you and give them a red hot go of practicing over the coming weeks and months. So making time for sleep, making sure that you actually carve out time, making sure that sleep is able to be a priority for you, making sure that you do have routine sleep and wake times. It's a really important thing, that consistency. In fact, research tells us that consistency is more important for health than duration of sleep. So keep that in mind. Have this buffer zone before bed where you actively disconnect from stress and worry and gaming or emails or whatever it is, and have an unwinding period where you relax, whether you just watch your favorite show or you are doing breathing exercises or a bit of yoga, whatever it is. Making sure that you get outside in the day to maximize your light exposure during the daytime. Outdoor light, as much exercise as you can get, is going to be a really important thing for sleep. Making sure that your time in bed is only for sleeping. So you're only in bed for the time that you need to sleep. So if you're someone who gets 6 hours or so of sleep, I'd love to see you in your bed for no more than 6.5 hours throughout the 24-hour period. So important to match the time in bed with the amount of sleep that you need or the sleep that you're actually getting. Look after your sleep drive. Think about being as sleepy as possible at the right times. So you've got to think about reducing your napping or making sure that your napping is only short periods of 20, 30 minutes. I want you to change the way you think about your sleep. Recognize that waking up is okay. Waking up is normal, but staying awake is not normal. So that's the things you can work on with these other strategies. Be positive about sleep. Don't catastrophize it. Know that it can get better and it will get better. It's highly modifiable. It's one of those things in health that once you got the right information, it's much easier to manage than pain. It's easier to manage than quitting smoking, easier than losing weight. There's a whole lot of things that getting good sleep is actually really modifiable. You just got to get the right information, have the right kind of attitudes as well, and being patient with yourself, being positive about it. Think about the daily worry journal that we talked about and the gratitude list. Give that a go. It might really be something that resonates with you. Think about the nighttime self-soothing techniques, like some breathing exercises, some meditation, um, other things we spoke about. Practice more relaxation. Think about if you're someone who really doesn't do any, then start doing some. If you're someone who thinks you do a bit of relaxation, add in a little bit more. Maybe add in 5 minutes more a day to see how that goes. Less caffeine in your life will be a good thing. It doesn't have to be absolutely nothing. That's important. Some people really resist the temptation. Some people really reduce caffeine to zero, and that's good if you don't really love it. But if you're someone who really enjoys at least a morning coffee or a lunchtime coffee, then please treat yourself to still having some kind of treat, but just be aware of minimizing it. Obviously, nicotine there's no safe level or desirable level. I would give up smoking altogether if you can, but certainly separate your sleeping from your smoking. And similarly with alcohol, it's not really good for health in any way, but you might want to have just a drink here and there as a celebration or an unwinding thing, but making sure that it's not close to bed because it's not good for sleep. We have lots of different fact sheets at the Sleep Health Foundation. We've got over 100, nearly 100 different fact sheets on our website. If I was you, I would go to the A to Z topics of sleep. Other handy sleep resources outside of the Sleep Health Foundation. I would encourage you to look at This Way Up, has online courses for insomnia, anxiety management, depression, etc., and they're free. I want you to look at A Mindful Way to Healthy Sleep. It's not free, but it's evidence-based, and it can be a really useful thing to learn how to deal with sleep, particularly if you're feeling really that you might have a condition, say insomnia, that has been going for many months, and despite adequate opportunity and best efforts, you're still struggling to sleep. For children, there's lots of different apps as well, and there's a list there on your slide. Think about one thing that you might immediately do to improve your sleep health or that of a loved one. And if you're already on track with your sleep, think about all the stuff we've talked about and be aware of perhaps what the main things are that are helping you to maintain this great track record with your sleep. So just, being aware of what works for you, being aware of what you need to change, and having this sort of call to action is something I really encourage you to do. So the main take-home points are that immunodeficiencies may create possible issues relevant to sleep. But the good news is that not everyone is affected, and certainly not to the same degree. And there are plenty of things you can do to improve your sleep. And these include understanding more about the way sleep works, changing certain behaviors, such as altering the timing of your sleep and your activities, and the amount and timing of the light exposure. And of course, modifying how you think about sleep, ensuring that you reach out for help if, despite implementing all of this new knowledge, you're still unable to get adequate sleep, or if you feel like you're too sleepy. Absolutely talk to your trusted healthcare professional about that and start getting some help, because there is help out there and there are sleep solutions available to you. So thank you very much for your attention. I wish you every success with your sleep health, as I have no doubt in improving your sleep will have positive effects on your health and your well-being.